Thank you. I am extremely excited to be here with three art dealers, gallerists that I've admired for so long and had a joy to visit their galleries in Mexico City, in London, in New York. I'll do a very, very quick introduction so we can get into the heart of it. To my left is Mónica Manzutto, of course, from Kurimanzutto, formed in Mexico City as a nomadic gallery in 1999. Did just incredibly venturesome projects around the city, which I hope we'll get into. Kind of becomes a little bit more formalized in 2008. And of course now has just a gigantic palatial compound in Mexico City as well as a Chelsea branch. To her left is Sadie Coles, of course the London dealer who opened up Sadie Coles HQ in '97. Has 3 locations in London now and has, true of all of these dealers, supported some of the most incredible, most venturesome artists of our time. To our left is Jasmin Tsou, a longtime New York dealer who ran JTT. For my generation, I'm in my late 30s, was just a real hothouse, proving ground, exceptional place for young talent. Just a remarkably artist-driven program that ran from 2012 until 2023. And now Jasmin is a director at Lisson Gallery, which of course has branches in its hometown of London, New York, LA, Shanghai, and Beijing. We're going to dive into it. The topic of this panel was proposed by Loring, and it actually came from something that Sadie had said in an interview a couple of years ago with Jarvis Cocker, of course, the frontman of Pulp, one of the greatest end of 20th century bands. And she said, when you're putting a program together for your gallery, it can't be a monoculture. You want to reflect the world, and the world changes all the time. And so that's where we get the subtitle of our panel, Galleries in a Changing World. I was especially excited that we homed in on these 3 panelists because I think they represent a very specific model, which is they have not expanded to 10, 12, 15 branches around the world. When you walk into their galleries, you know a very specific sense of what you're going to expect. Even if it's unexpected, you know an artist who fits their roster. So I wanted to tee up one more quote before we jump into questions, which is from Dave Hickey. And he was talking to the journalist Sarah Douglas, who will also be a moderator here at Talking Galleries. And she asked him, what's different? This was in about 2008. What's different about galleries nowadays? And he says, now they're department stores. Stables of artists once embodied the taste of the gallerist. Now everybody has one of each. Your Iranian minimalist photographer, your elegant object maker, your Berlin pornographer. Galleries were once known for the artists they exhibit. Now they're known for the clientele they represent. So they make more profit, but they have less power and influence. And I would say that the three incredible dealers on stage really stand in opposition to that. We know who's on their roster. We know what they stand behind. They're principled. And of course, they represent very different positions, geographically, generationally. And so to dive into it, I would love to just start out. I'll throw this to the group. Over the past 10, 20, 30 years, what have been the big challenges and big, more so, changes that you've seen in the gallery world, running a gallery?
That's a huge span of time, first of all, most of which I've been around for, because I'm the eldest here. But I would say that 30 years ago, it was the internet, which obviously speeded up all the transactions in such a radical way. In terms of how you reach your audience, in terms of the locations that you're working in terms of the way art was looked at and bought. And in a way, the bad thing about that is that art somehow got less important than the other part of it. The transactional side of things. And in a way, I think that one of the things that unites all of us is actually that art is very much at the center of what we do, and we're fighting for that in a way. 20 years, that's really the beginning of the dominance of art fairs and biennials and the change of the sort of global shape of the art world, I would say. And that has affected really the content in a really big way, like what we're showing, who we're talking to, where we're going, where we're seeing art. So that has, I would say, that's 20 years. 10 years, that's actually a lot to do with, also to do with content in this, the changing agenda that Jerry talked about so well at the beginning of that talk, which is diversity, like the content of what we're showing, what museums are showing, what collectors are buying, what the museums are buying. That has changed enormously. And now I think we're at the end of a particular cycle, so this is now. And as I said, I feel a bit like we've come to a moment of another change, which is to maybe correct some of that. And I went to the Met yesterday and just wandered around for hours, and actually being in museums, looking at art, visiting studios, seeing galleries, is actually, to me, coming much more back into the middle in a way that perhaps the art fairs had been in that place for a while, or the auction houses, so I sort of think we're in a cyclical change. I would also say that change is good.
Yeah. Does anyone else feel that way, that there is this moment where there is a shift? I mean, Monica, when we chatted yesterday, you were saying that we're at this this kind of post-pandemic moment where there were all these sort of lessons taken away. And I think part of that was issues around diversity and political engagement with art. But I wonder if in this moment you're feeling things that learnings from the pandemic, things that changed, and looking forward, you're taking away from that.
Well, I'm going to speak from a very personal point of view, but when we opened the gallery in 1999 in a market for 12 hours, that was pretty much what there was. Maybe 3 collectors, a bunch of artists who were our friends, who we decided to open the gallery with. But at that time, when we said, but the changing, everything has changed ever since, and it's been that change has been part of our story and the way we do things, because we opened the gallery for a very specific reason. There was a need for the gallery. It wasn't a business plan. There was never a business plan. It was a real need to have a gallery that would represent a group of artists, a generation of artists, mostly Mexican. Only Rick Tiravanilla was not Mexican, but that need was very much there. What we could do was all to be built and imagined and created together, because there was no market, no institutions. It was almost like, everybody asks us, like, why did you study if you're going to go for this? And there's nothing. It was such a desert in that way. And of course, being a gallery without a fixed space gave us a lot of freedom. And I think that is a freedom also that one would like to go back to have 20 or 30 years later. Because it is with the artists that we created everything that we have. We've never taken any decision without them. But of course, at the same time, not all of them have grown together or at the same pace. And so the gallery has to be able to adapt and work for and represent all these different artists at these different stages. But yes, I think art changes have happened every 10 years in a way that for not having space to having a space in Mexico City, which also was a very organic situation, because the artists were really starting to travel a lot around the globe, and they were no longer there to bring all the energy and all the ideas that you need to have to be able to take over the city and all these different spaces. And we opened that space. And then 10 years later, we said, okay, we're going to open a gallery in New York for those artists who don't have a gallery in New York, and who are a few of them. And I think that's for us, that's always what kind of brings us to the next step. It's mostly the artists and how we can create situations in which we can give them more space.
Right. I love what it feels like you're homing in on this nomadic origin you had, and this clear need you were addressing. These are artists who need our support. Their art institutions has kind of shaped your worldview as you go through these changes. So I think about like when you went to First Art Basel, you do the Dr. Lacra tattoo booth, and that feels like a very natural extension. You engage with these other aspects of the art industry in a very specific way. Jasmin, I'd love to kind of then go to your origin story, and so people can understand how you conceived a mission and then stayed sort of true to it as you were running JTT.
Well, I enjoyed the timeline that Sadie shared because I was experiencing that timeline but much younger. So I would say I went to school at NYU and graduated in 2006, but I had started working in New York as soon as I got here in like 2002 and started working in galleries. But really the internet was what started my interest in art in a new way. I mean, I went to art school, but it was the way in which artists were sharing art online, hugely inspired. Like Cory Archangel was hugely influential to me and Borna Samak, who I represented, and Sadie now does too. And like Borna had this blog and he put stuff on it. And like, you know, it was this time when you would go to work and you would always have like a blog up on half your screen and looking and seeing what your friends were posting. And it felt like a very optimistic relationship to the internet. I think I'd spent a lot of time in college. You know, I studied beneath Kevin McCoy, who like later becomes really influential in the sort of NFT game. But in college was sort of explaining to us what the internet was going to be, and that it was going to be this real trajectory of optimism and ultimate, you know, precarity. And he really, like, I think, gave us a lot to think about. And so I think, anyway, that's how, it was through the internet that I met, you know, Damon Zucconi and became really interested in his work. And I really thought it was gonna have a longer life than it did. In terms of just like using the internet as a place to unpack language. But I think what happened over time is that in the way that capitalism does, we are so separated from understanding the internet. Most people that use it don't really understand how it works. We are separated as a consumer from it in such a way. And I don't know if art is really able to show us I mean, there was a moment in 2007 where I really felt like the way that the artists were using the internet, it was showing us what the internet was. You know, there was like ways that coding was very clever. I don't know if that's happening right now. Anyway, but also to speak to like how I started a gallery, I was working at Michelle Macaron's and briefly at Dennis Kimmerich's, and I think I very much started like, whatever, there's a lot to it, but essentially, like Matthew Higgs had suggested I start a booth at NADA for like $2,000, and I like asked Michelle Macaron for a $2,000 loan. Like everything just was very like super, I had no money. Amazing. And just started it with artists that I had met basically on blogs who had also happened to be in New York, and also people that I went to school with, went to NYU with. And all those artists were a part of the gallery up until the end. But it was very much a New York gallery. Yes. And I think that it only worked because I had so much trust with these people who were my friends to have faith in me. And I think that actually what I was trying to do towards the end, as my artists started getting into the Venice Biennale, like I think during COVID, I was like, okay, I really want my world to be big. I want the gallery to be bigger. I want it to participate in this international conversation. And obviously that requires a tremendous amount of money and resources. And I think I was kind of like 1 foot in that direction when I realized like, you know, I might not actually, I mean, I don't actually have the resources to play at this level. And that was a change that I needed to make personally, you know. So I think, you know, I know that there are reasons why galleries expand internationally that have financial benefits, but there's also huge financial risks. And not that I was like looking to expand, but just looking to participate at that level as a New York gallery.
Yeah.
It's hard.
No, I'm so glad. I mean, you're teeing up in a very honest way this question of how you compete in this field. Sadie, you've kept your gallery London-based. Monica, you've of course opened in New York. I'd be curious to hear from you both about that decision to stay local, but of course have a very global reach, global group of artists. For you, in a very considered way, to expand, and how you're thinking about that right now.
I mean, there have been moments where I've been very tempted to come and open in New York, actually, or other places like Paris. You know, there are lots of places that I think, like, well, that would be fun.
Yeah.
But actually, I'm a woman and I had a child, so that's a big factor of I wanted to be in one location to bring up my kid. And if I had another 2 or 3 locations, then I'd be traveling even more. So that was a really, really big factor. Finally, I'm getting my kid to leave the house. so I would say I'd never say never. But having said that, I think, you know, at the end of the day, the kind of galleries we run are very about the relationship with the artist, a very close relationship with the artist. And if I'm running a big corporation, I can't be available to everybody on the phone.
Yeah.
Because they're asking me about a new body of work that they're embarking on, or what to do about a museum show, and the same is true of the relationship with the collectors. People know that they can reach you if you stay a certain scale. And that, for me, is also the joy of it. I want to be having time to do studio visits and talk to the artists and just hang out sometimes, because you get so much from that.
Yeah.
So I guess that's really why I stayed in one place.
Yeah, amazing. And how about New York, coming here, making that decision?
Well, it all happened very organic, and our first arrival to the city was a very soft landing in a viewing room that we had in the Upper East Side on the 4th floor. So something very, very quiet, and it really came about because we did have a wonderful director at that time who approached us to work for kurimanzutto, us being in Mexico, not yet we didn't have the office yet. And so we said, okay, you know, if it's easier for you to have an office and work from an office and try to meet people there, we can do it. And then a year later, me and Jose with the kids, we wanted to spend a year abroad. And of course, we thought about Japan. Japan was like, okay, we're going to be away. We're going to take a sabbatical, and
nice.
we can afford a sabbatical after 20 years of very hard work and not paying attention to the kids because I was traveling and Jose was traveling. It's like, okay, let's give them 1 year of our full attention. But of course, it was kind of crazy, like to be in New York, in Japan, and then the kids in, the 2 galleries, one in New York and one in Mexico, was like, when we said, okay, let's go to New York. And so we got here, and then the pandemic hit. And so that was it. We ended up spending so much time with the kids. I was like, great, this is perfect. Perfect time for us to think also what is next. By the time the pandemic was kind of like not a thing anymore for us in terms of like, really, do we go back to Mexico or do we stay? The kids didn't want to leave. They were like, you know, you made us change already. We had to go through the pandemic. You know, we're not going anywhere. And we said, okay, then that's it. We'll open a real gallery for us to be able to engage with the city in a different way. And me and Jose, we spend a lot of time here. So it's not like I don't see New York as a branch.
Yeah.
I see really New York as part of our, you know, like me and Jose, like having 2 hands, or like, and we relate to that space in that way. And that's how also we develop the projects. We're very close to the artist. But I do wanted to just really quick go back before the pandemic. Jose and I were already having some issues, or were already kind of troubled by the way things were moving in terms of like, you know, this very fast thing. The market wasn't, because art wasn't really an industry until, I don't know, not way after we all of us opened a gallery. It wasn't really like such a blooming thing all the time. And all of a sudden, we found each other like, okay, what do we do that we can, that will bring joy to us, to what us as gallerists. And so we came up with a project in which we said, okay, we're just going to change the way we work, the way we show art, and the way we time it. And Jose and I had taken a permaculture workshop, and we saw how important it was in permaculture that you have crops at all different levels of crops at different times. And we said, okay, why don't we just change the space and we partitioned the space, in the Mexico City space, into 7 spaces. And we created a program that was going to last 1 year. It ended up lasting 2 years because of the pandemic, and that was great. And it was about bringing and bridging also not only the artists in the gallery, but also artists that are not in the gallery. Friends of ours who were closing their galleries kind of took over one of the spaces and stayed there for a year. And that was a kind of a really nice collaboration of us kind of giving away, that space to let other things happen. And maybe those collaborations and that diversity that you also spoke about, Sadie, that was very important in the way we also came to understand what we could do in New York, or how we could exist after the pandemic even.
Yes.
And as a response also to a corporate, to a corporate gallery, or whatever the art world is moving really, really fast. And I don't know, some people say, what are you doing in terms of like sales on the internet? I'm like, nothing. I'm not selling on, I don't have like, and what's your data? I'm like, I have no,
yeah.
So it's because it's really about the relationship with the artists and the relationship with the curators and the gallery and the other galleries and the collectors. It's really that that nurtures and that fuels everything that we do. Yeah.
Totally. I met someone recently who works for one of these data teams at one of the mega galleries, and it's astonishing. It's amazing to me. But I'm flashing back to when you were doing those collaborations, and it was so exciting. Sitting at home, of course, being like, oh boy, nothing to do, and even viscerally seeing the sort of collaborations, the people you were welcoming in. It was exciting because you got to see a bigger picture of what was happening in Mexico City through your networks. And so I did want to tee up this question of collaboration. And I know Jasmin and Sadie have a long-running, really, and I'll toss it to both of you as well. Right, I was reading an interview with Jeffrey Rosen, and he was saying, like, there are 2 ways to run a gallery. You can run, like, the super big money, all-powerful mega ship kind of thing, or you have a really collaborative gallery. And I think you're all great examples of that. And could I toss it to you, talk about what role collaboration plays in what you do?
I have no idea what Sadie gets out of it, but I know that Sadie has been really supportive of JTT. And me, as an individual, I think she was really good at checking in with me. I'm getting emotional just because it's fucking hard. Sorry. It's just a hard business. And Sadie would just check in with me a lot and send people to me, and
Didn't realize I was learning so much from you at the same time.
Yeah, that's nice.
It's true.
I think that what I was building was so specific to New York, so there was fun things to share with Sadie when she would come to New York, for sure. Like, this is what I'm excited about, and I think everything that I did was just at a different level. It was always people's, first solo shows. And I've been thinking a lot about the film industry as like a metaphor for like just understanding how that works, which I don't know anything about, but we have so much crossover, of course, like our worlds. And I think that sometimes I feel like the art dealer is kind of like an agent to a actor, but sometimes I feel like we also have this role of being a director. And that's when it can be really beautiful, of course, in this kind of like consensual and collaborative way, where the artist really needs actually a certain type of trust to sort of blossom and make what they don't really understand is within them to make. And it's really incredible to be a part of that. And I think that was something that I could recognize in Sadie in the way that she worked, and I felt like she recognized in me. It's not just about this business, it's a really beautiful type of production and producing. Like, I get a lot of creative satisfaction out of making a show with somebody. Not that I'm like making any decisions at all. I'm horrible at giving advice on what they're producing. It's much more just about believing in somebody. And anyway, that's what I like to believe that is my role spread out in the.
Yeah.
Totally.
I mean, I think that you're a sort of art superhero because you have actually put that relationship right at the center of your gallery. Like, how do I produce the show or the body of work that the artist wants? And that's such a pure
with
thing.
$2,000.
But actually, to enormous risk to your own business. I mean, actually, at the end of the day, that's why you don't have JTT, because you just went for it in the most fantastic, pure way. And I really admire that, Jasmin. I think you're a hero.
Thank you.
And that was just the first act as well, so I'm sure there's amazing things to come. But your gallery is the same, you know, you've always put the artists and what they want to do and the crazy ideas they all come up with.
Yes.
And actually the crazier the better, that's the problem for all of us, is the crazier, the more we can't resist it.
I do have to say that I kind of missed the time when I was able to sell instructions and a piece of ceiling with hanging from whatever, and people would believe, you know, like that sense that people would just, curators and collectors were going for everything, right? Like they were really like,
I mean,
crazy. The amount of weird stuff that I sold over the years was amazing. Now I only sell paintings, but hey, I also have sold other really fantastic things. And I hope that cycle will come back at some point. For some artists, at least, I think it's important. And
we've got to stop asking them for work for an art fair.
Yes.
This is a really big problem.
Yes.
I was actually going to say we have to start learning how to ask them for art. But I mean, JTT, like its success, it's where I got kind of my first financial feet on the ground was selling Born a Samak videos. Selling videos was enough for me just to get the next round up, which is kind of wild to think about now, I think. I just don't think that, to your point, we're in that same landscape. Right. And of course, that was just the round one. I definitely have sold a lot of painting too, but yeah.
Yeah. I do like the idea of trust. I think, I feel like we trust each other there's a group of people that trust each other. And I think that part, there's nothing, only you can make it happen, right? Only you with another person. And communication, of course, language, and it's for me, it's really what I love the most, and that's also why we opened New York. We thought we think that there's lots of people in the city that trusts us, trust what we do, and trust what the artists do, of course, and at some point, there will be, we will be able to create something that maybe similar to what we created in Mexico. We'll see.
I mean, I would also say that I think because of the pandemic, largely actually, collaboration between galleries, especially galleries that have a similar kind of ethos, came out of necessity, actually. So there is now a lot more collaboration between partner galleries, especially because a lot of the artists that our type of gallery works with, they do come up with these harebrained, expensive schemes. And the only way you can get them off the ground is by working with other people who represent the artists. So there's a lot of sharing of resources and funding and collectors, actually. So to get publishing, to get things to happen, you actually do need to collaborate more. And I think in a way, because of the freeze frame of the pandemic, we all reached out to each other at that point and tried to come up with solutions about how to make things work. And that built a lot of bridges that are still working today. Mm-hmm. Don't you think?
I have a question, actually. It's a little bit of a different direction what you're saying, but I was thinking a little bit about the collaboration between the artist and the dealer. That's more the collaboration I've ended up relying on, not to say that I haven't received a ton of support from other dealers, but I think this one really big shift happened for JTT, and it was a necessary shift, which was so many of the relationships were built on trust, but also a sort of give and take that only a very personal relationship can withstand, a lot of generosity. And I think that as you professionalize, you have to shift towards not getting this kind of like, not really structuring all of your relationships on this kind of personal, like, I got a lot out of, like spiritual, things out of those experiences, but at the end of the day, people need to make money. So did you guys, have you ever experienced that type of shift that I'm sort of talking about, where the relationships had to become more professionalized, less collaborative, less generosity, or do you feel like it's always a changing thing? Which is just me.
No. It's such a personal thing, the relationship with the artist, and I would find it, no, I've never been able to professionalize it. It's so kind of close, and ultimately, we all drank the Kool-Aid, so it's you just go with trying to do what the artist is asking for. Yeah. I mean, I think one of the big differences is that actually what artists are expecting from galleries now has really increased enormously. I mean, just on the resources that they need from you now are very different than they were even 10 years ago in terms of archive support, production support. All of that has, I mean, I have no idea how many employees you have, but I have 5 people who are just doing digital. Wow. And that is kind of something that all the artists expect, because they want their work to be visible on social media and on film walkthroughs, on interviews, publishing, all of it. There's quite a different level of service that galleries are now expected to provide to their artists. And that demands a very, very fast expansion that is incredibly hard for small galleries. Mm-hmm. Yes. For small model galleries or new galleries. The other thing is that, and I like just thinking about that, like, you would do the first show of an artist and they would expect you to be doing Basel within like 2 years of opening or something. And if you're not doing Basel, then they're giving the work to someone else. It's an unbelievable pressure for young galleries, and that to me is something that I find quite worrying, because for our system we need new young galleries bringing new artists, whether they're old or young or wherever they're from, into the system all the time. And if we can't help them do that, then we don't want to be without JTT.
Yeah.
I'm still here, guys.
As a journalist, it terrifies me as well that we won't have these continual new generations as real estate becomes more expensive, as the fairs become more onerous to do in terms of just raw capital. Jasmin, you brought up something when you were making the comparison to the film industry, I think, that is interesting, and it's dovetailing a little bit with what Sadie has said, which is, what is your role? It's agent for the artist, it's director. It makes me think about also just how the nature of representation has changed. This model of exclusivity, global versus in a city. I'm curious if any of you would want to weigh in on how that works for your gallery, starting with kurimanzutto, of course, a very close-knit group of artists. How you think about representation as you grow, the roster, and set expectations for artists in terms of what you can do for them?
Well, I've an answer for this. I had to work through this with therapy, actually, which is I think it used to be you would sit with an artist and say, what do you need? And then they would give you a list and you'd be like, got it. And you'd go out and you'd try to check everything off as opposed to coming and saying, this is what we can do. And I think that's a hard thing to kind of come to terms with yourself, of what your own limitations are, and being able to be honest with your artist about what you can do, what you're going to try to do, I think one of the hardest things too is how do you update the people that you're collaborating with on what you're working on in a way that feels authentic. You're like, I kind of spoke with this one person at a dinner and I'm feeling really good about it, and I know it's going to lead to something really great in about 4 years, and they're just like, thanks for the update, but that's actually what we're doing all the time. And yeah.
You're in it for the long haul. That struck me when Sadie, when we talked the other day, you were talking about potentially working with a new artist, and it's been a decade in the work of visiting with this person and getting to know them. And when you have these really set programs that you start out with, I'm curious, how do you go about adding someone in this moment, knowing it's right?
In the history of the gallery, it's always been an artist pointing at another artist, more or less. So in that way, it's been rather organic. And since we did Siembra, the show at the gallery, also because of the pandemic, it became a very local project. And that was also interesting in terms of looking at the younger generation that was coming out of Mexico, not only Mexico City, but also other places in Mexico. But I think most of the artists that have joined the gallery have been through the eye of another artist, or through that nucleus that each artist has, and that they feel like they want to bring with them or share with the gallery. Here in New York, it's different. We have, I think because we are here, we also would like, it was important for me, and it is still very important for me and Jose and everybody in the team, that we connect to the city. And so we are starting to invite artists who are living in New York and who connect us to the city in a very kind of more direct way. So yeah, that's more or less how we've done that.
I'm curious also, just thinking about changes. I mean, we're coming out of, to go back to Sadie's great walkthrough of kind of the decade changes, it does feel like the art fair still looms large, but even if you believe Art Basel's data, the emphasis is maybe a little coming off of it in terms of revenue, in terms of sales. I'd be curious what role right now the art fair plays for you in terms of thinking how you're going to bring this group of artists beyond your home bases, 1 city, 2 cities. How are you making those decisions about where to show, what art fairs to do?
Well, I think actually things are constantly changing, and as I said earlier, I think that's actually a really good thing. Art fairs particularly tend to be very,
cyclical, yeah.
And actually, like I've been thinking a lot about what is the function for me, like what is the function right now for me for a fair, because to a certain extent, there's a sophisticated level of collector who are bored sick of going to fairs, and actually they don't really need to, because they get sent millions of PDFs the week before.
Right.
I mean, we've sort of eaten ourselves. It's a cannibalization that is a little bit foolish, I think.
Yeah.
So there's that. So then if the world's best collectors are no longer going to the major fairs because they can see all the material in advance and they feel that it's kind of it's a bit tired, then what's the function for me? And to a certain extent, it takes it back to the original function of the fair, which is meeting new people.
Yes.
So in a way, I am quite interested in, alongside the fairs, the dominant fairs, like all the Basel ones, for instance, that in a certain extent you have to show up and do them because that's the top level, and it would be very detrimental not to be there for the artists you're showing. But actually, I'm kind of more interested in fairs where I'm really reaching a new audience. So say, for instance, the Tokyo Fair, the Gendai, which is in July, where you're honestly meeting new people, you're showing your artist to an audience who've often never seen it before. So in a way, I've been thinking about that a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there are too many, so then that's also...
No, it's outrageous. And how many are you doing right now a year? Is it?
8.
8. Okay.
I was doing 10, and I've actually...
Slate, yeah. JTT, how many were you doing regularly?
We were doing between 3 and 5 a year.
Got it.
To give some interesting statistics, my business is closed, so I can talk openly about some of this.
Lay it out,
I think that I hear that most galleries do 20 to 30% of their business at fairs. JTT was doing 5% of its business at fairs. We were really selling a lot in New York, and which I'm very grateful for. We were selling our shows out at times when I think people weren't. And that was just something that made it hard for me because I didn't know how. I think that in order for a fair to be successful for a gallery my size, you have to have 2 to 3 artists that are in the 50 to 100K range, and you have to have one artwork from each of them. That's a pretty simple math. And just some years you just don't have that inventory. It can be pretty traumatic for a young gallery to experience a loss, but you also can't not participate. And this is not any shade towards the fairs themselves. I think that I have the right to say no. It was a decision that I was making. I felt like I wanted to participate in terms of what I was getting out of it. So it was just a weird thing that JTT, that's just how my business is run. And I mean, there was moments where it felt like meeting new people had its advantages, but it takes time. You have to be able to afford that 2 to 3 year delay of investing in a new location and waiting for those relationships to pan out. I mean,
Totally. I love the transparency. Thank you for that. And kurimanzutto, how many fairs are you at a year?
We do normally 8, I think.
Okay.
7, 8.
And same roster every time, or you're making some changes as you go?
I think each time we try to find new ways.
Yeah.
So, for example, oftentimes we do solo presentations or 2 artist presentations, and then depending on the fair and depending on what the inventory is, or if an artist has an important project that you want to kind of insist or make sure that that they get the attention. But I think it's more and more a need for us to bring attention to certain projects. So we try to, also because we have so many colleagues that we share artists with. So if you go to Paris or to Basel, we could all of a sudden look like there are 3 very similar booths because we all have the same artists with the same similar work. And I think that's very kind of detrimental for the artists, but also for us. So, also that communication with the galleries has been very important, that we are kind of communicating and making sure that we don't have those overlaps. But the fairs are still a very important part of what we do. We do get to know a lot of new people, and as after the pandemic, also in Hong Kong, this was the first time that I feel like everybody was back together in Asia. And Asia is a huge, it's a huge region. It's Southeast Asia, it's Philippines, Jakarta, Indonesia. So that was important. Those moments are important. Those connections are important. And there's always something that by seeing and talking and spending time with all these people, it's something else will come out. So the world's really, maybe one of those changes is that maybe 20 years ago, the world became much bigger with Middle East, and then bigger again with Asia. And so it's how we try to cover it all and make sure that we are able to share.
Being targeted, still have to do the big ones.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Speaking of change too, I'm also just interested in changing. Like, I'm personally bored of just talking about a very narrow set of interests, and I just like want my own life to be more expanded. I want to have more knowledge outside of, I mean, that's what art, I think, that's why I came here. That's what it's done for me historically, and I think that when you get stuck in the grind, your perspectives get really narrow, just like.
Yeah. Can you say more about that in terms of like?
I don't know, like, it's really important that I don't know, I remember talking to Sadie about how many books Sadie reads a lot. I remember like talking to her about books she's reading, and it's like, I never had time to read books. It's like very simple things, or just times like, being able to travel. The art world has brought me around the world. Like, I have seen more cities than I ever would because of art, and I'm very grateful for that. But unfortunately, it's like also in convention centers and in these like very limited ways, or like very small incremental differences between what an artist is interested in. And I feel like I want my own personal life to be more curious, to be more expansive, and I want that of the artists that I get a chance to be around. And I'm expecting that in the future, and I think it's something that art has, again, historically given me. It's just been really tough, I think, post-pandemic. There was like a really intense grind I got stuck in.
Yeah.
And I'm just grateful to not be in that, because it's boring. It's a
Yeah.
boring grind. Like, a 15-day grind is boring.
Yeah, I think hopefully that is a positive change. I mean, and the convention center, it breaks my heart. When I lived in Seoul especially, all of these dealers would fly in and they wouldn't even be able to use the restroom at the convention center or get lunch out on the town. You're just stuck there. And so maybe there is this greater sense of you can scale back to a few less fairs. But then maybe that is a kind of segue toward thinking about, I want to make sure we're a little forward-looking as we look at these challenges. And I'd be curious what you would identify as just major challenges for you right now. What does it feel like looking forward 2, 5, 10 years with your business you're trying to navigate? What's a real sticky issue for you?
Many, but one of them is definitely growing too much, even the roster, and not being able to be close to the artists and work with them and make sure that we are building something together.
Yeah.
I have experienced that the best things, the best projects, what artists like the most is to have you really close and really focus on what on their career or their projects. And for me, that is the biggest challenge, to become a little too thin in terms of not having enough time to spend with them. And
Yeah.
With some artists might be more dynamic, but others really need a lot of more thinking, and you need to come up with totally different ways of doing things, because this might not be their time. So it's like, but this is what they do. They make a living of doing art. So for me, that is the most challenging part, for sure.
How about you, Sadie?
I think just keep, after you go first. I got to think about
Well, I mean, I'm now a director at Lisson, so I think that my, future holds a lot of just thinking about how I can apply everything that I've done for the past 10 years to this new role. And it's exciting because one of the reasons why I wanted to go to Lisson is I knew I had to believe really strongly in the roster, because you can't sell art if you don't believe in it. And I'm very excited about being able to sort of have a smaller business within this larger business. And there's still a lot of things that I think everything is applicable in a way, and I think that's very exciting. And I speak to that partially because I think something I realized when I closed JTT, because in a way it was something that just had to happen. I was psychologically I was at the end of, I would have had a breakdown, so I prevented it, I think. And I think a lot of people, afterwards it was partially, of course, sad, but also a little bit celebratory for me to do something that took care of myself and my own needs. And I got a lot of people coming up to me and telling me how sorry they were. And I kind of helped other people grieve. Because there was something that GTT represented for them that I have no idea what it was, but it was like a ton of projection, and I think that we all have kind of like this, I think we have a big fear of death that's kind of going on, that I felt like anything closing kind of represents, and so I'm just trying to like realize, oh, like, I don't have to be afraid of things ending and how things change. I don't have to be afraid of an artist shifting, like, so I don't know, just been thinking about death a lot. And that.
Yeah, always.
I mean, I guess, the biggest question for me is how, it's about it's inward looking.
Yeah.
It's like I have to be very conscious to keep my energy level, my interest, my heart open to everything. And that's obviously, as a person who's a little bit older, I think about that. I'm 60 years old, and I think about how do I keep looking and searching and staying interested in younger people, and maybe not, and people who are maybe different to me in different locations around the world. That really drives me at the moment, and I wonder, does that turn off at some point? So that's what that's my major concern, really.
A good one.
The rest of it will. What will be. If one of my artists decides to leave me for a mega gallery, what can I do about it? It's not.
Yeah.
Or if the economic circumstances mean that I can't have 3 galleries in London, I have to reduce down to 1, or the economic circumstances mean that I should open another 2.
Yeah.
Who knows? That, in a way, is just stuff. But the rest of it, the keeping open to art and thinking about how to help the artists I work with, that's all down to me, really.
Yes. Yeah. I know, and that's what makes the whole system function, right? Staying fresh, being open to experiences, reading books. I mean, I always think about this lecture Peter Schjeldahl gave, where he said, like, I never read art criticism. I go to the theater. I go to concerts. You go to great restaurants. Like, this is how we have, so we don't get trapped in this, like, psycho art bubble. I want to delve back. Jasmin, something you said very early on stuck with me, which is, I didn't know about Borna's blog. Is it still online?
Oh, Double Happiness? It was like he was one of 4 people, like a collective.
Amazing. Is it still, is it still available?
Don't go there.
Don't go there. Got it. But it does strike me, my entrance into journalism was through blogging. It was a very optimistic moment. We were learning about artists. We've gone through, of course, with the art world, with galleries, all sorts of waves with the internet. I think about, I was working at a gallery in 2009, maybe 2010, when the VIP art fair happened. I don't know if anyone remembers this. Yeah, bizarre thing. I mean, great, like they really worked hard on it, but it was like there were these little dioramas of people, and you had to like place the art on the wall with your JPEG, and it kept crashing, and they worked so darn hard and tried to make it right. But all of which is to say, I mean, the internet has taken on all these different roles. If you go to Sadie's website, you find these beautiful video walkthroughs. JTT used to have a podcast. Amazing. So they're just different engagement. And so I would be curious how it's such a broad question, but how are you thinking about the internet now? You're not selling through the internet, you said, which I love very specifically.
We have sold.
You have sold, yes.
On Instagram, but without wanting. So
That's the best kind of, right, you're just doing your thing.
it happens.
Yeah. But what role does it play, if any? Or are you thinking about it in new ways, or?
I think to just be a little bit more specific, I think why I was bringing the internet up is that it was a moment where an artist could make a joke about coding, and everybody that was on that blog understood it.
Yeah.
Because we understood how to code, we understood the jokes and the way that the internet is working. Not to derail your question, but I think we as a community don't understand the internet.
Totally.
So when artists that make a funny joke about the way in which we are processing or consuming things, nobody gets it. Mm-hmm. And so therefore, there's going to be, this whole category is unfortunately just not being explored because people don't get the joke. And I think that art is a conversation, it's a historical conversation. You jump in and out of it, right? And there's parts we understand or don't understand. There's regions we understand or don't understand. And that's the beauty, is that you can learn so much about these, you can sit and listen to the conversations in the room and learn. And we're not taught, like, sorry, I'm just kind of repeating myself, but it's astounding, I think, like, what little we understand with the stuff that we interact with on a daily basis.
I agree with you, and I think the art world hasn't cracked it in any meaningful way. We have no idea what we're doing.
And I mean, the podcast was a means, that's less about technology, because I mean, you could, like, the radio has been around. It was more just about getting artists to talk about the things that I knew they wouldn't put in a press release, which is really the stuff that you want to talk about.
That's the good stuff.
That's the good stuff.
That's the stuff that sells the art, maybe.
Yeah. And I think that sometimes the video walkthroughs are also an opportunity to do that. So it's a little bit about technology, but it's also kind of about creating a way in which a platform where the artist can be authentic to themselves. And press releases, unfortunately, are like not great places for that to happen.
Or journalism, a lot of times. I think, like, I'll be self-critical. We get very stuck, it was talked about in the last panel, in this market moment where we want to talk about the sales reports on opening day. And so to see galleries creating these alternative modes makes sense, and you realize, oh boy, we're really messing up over here in the journalistic sphere. A very basic question, but Sadie, could you talk about the video walkthroughs? Because they are so great, and like what role they play for you?
Well, really, because I mean, I see the internet as an incredibly efficient way to disseminate information, which means that you can communicate with a much broader audience. It's democratic, and actually those walkthroughs are really so that people can get a sense of what their body would feel like in relation to the artwork. So it's really to have as close an experience as possible. But at the end of the day, the internet has also just made the transactional side so kind of functional and present that, of course, what I really feel is that I kind of want everybody to come and look at art.
Yes.
In real life.
Yeah.
So there's kind of tension there, really.
Right.
I mean, I do think that there are some models though where the internet is now being used really, really brilliantly by more by specific artists or by communities that are using it to for a certain kind of function, for a specific kind of function, or as a place to showcase something really interesting. So, for instance, there's a collector in London that I work with quite closely called Shane Ackroyd, who's put his entire 200 and something video collection on a platform, and that for me is such a good use of it. So it has good and bad sides.
Yeah. For kurimanzutto, any aspect of the internet that is exciting for you at the moment, or?
Well, I think the videos is probably what we do a lot, but also like a deep dive into the archive, and I think that has been exciting for the artists, but also for the audiences, and we get, of course, I think we get a lot from that, like being able to, also because of, we share not only with the artists, but we share it with the team and we share it with the audience. So for us, going back into the archive, and which is, so much of our time and so resources go into that, probably that's the most, that's the strongest part that we have.
I saw you just did the most amazing, I posted on your website, I guess, about Gabriel Orozco and his sort of like voluminous publications. And I was looking at this like, oh my gosh, I haven't heard of most of this before. Totally new to me.
Yeah.
Really exciting.
It is about that kind of knowledge, of sharing knowledge and, making it more easily digested, but also making sure that it's there.
Totally,
Yeah.
totally. I just got the 5-minute warning, so I'll tee up one last question before we go to the audience questions. And it's hopefully not too amorphous, but I want to go to that quote from Sadie's interview where she said, I'll paraphrase it poorly, but as the world changes, you want your gallery to change with it. 25 years, 30 years now, 10, 15 years. times change. How have you kept the galleries relevant? How have you kept true to your original mission? How have you stayed fresh? I feel like this is a question that's kind of touching on things we've brought up in passing, but what has been kind of the key to keeping it exciting for you, keeping it something you're proud of doing with the gallery?
Wow.
The artists.
Yeah,
The artists, yeah.
Yes, the artists.
Yeah.
I mean, we have the best job in the world. You're just talking to these extraordinary thinkers all the time, and it's just amazing. It's so intellectually stimulating. It's meaningful. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. When Jasmin was saying, I want to keep learning and I want to, and Sadie reads a lot, you don't, I barely. But they do, they really do.
I mean, I'm reading more now. I'm like reading more now.
And these artists really do read and really do share. And if you have time, that's what it is. Time is probably the most precious thing for us to be able to spend. And it is through them that you stay connected, you stay younger. Ideas come also for all of us. They, at a time, I don't know, when there were no critics in Mexico, the artists were writing for each other's publications. Now it's us thinking about how we, sometimes the youngers are now thinking about the olders. I don't know, it's really, really incredible also how we, as galleries, we have the capacity to bridge between the young and the older artists.
Yes.
And that stays, it's fun for everyone. It's really joyful and really dynamic.
Totally.
Yeah, I feel like sometimes when I process JTT in the past year, I don't know how I come off, but I just want to be really clear that I really believe in art. I really love this job. I think it's one of the most, I feel so lucky. I feel like it's why I've risked everything to do what I fully believed in so much in every artist that I've worked with at the gallery. And I feel like for me, I'm just interested in a shift because I could see how the next 20 years was going to play out, and I just want to keep having this very abundant relationship with this with this community, which is really incredible. So
Totally. And I think that might be the perfect moment to stop on and say it's the artists, it's also the great art dealers that make this all work. So if you'll join me in giving them a round of applause, and then we'll do questions.
Thank you. I want to ask you, each gallerist, what they are thinking about digital art and NFT, and these are how they will affect the future of galleries. I am wondering. Thank you so much.
God. I don't know what's...
Well, NFTs, that always seems to me a bit of a red herring because, there was a real hot moment there for a bit where everybody was making NFTs and trading them and doing exciting stuff like that. But in a way, it's just the same as oil and canvas. It's just another form. And I think basically, if you get a really great artist making NFTs, digital art, a painting, if they're a really great artist, that will be a really great piece of art. So it doesn't really, it's just it's another form for me. We do sell quite a lot of time-based media work, so film and video, but I haven't ventured into the NFT sphere, mainly because I don't, a bit like print dealing, I also don't do a lot of print dealing because it's a sort of expert area, and that's not my area.
So the NFTs are so interesting because if I were to take a piece of paper and laminate it, it would be more durable than an NFT. But people don't understand NFTs or where they come from. It's kind of like if somebody came along and showed you a hard drive for the first time, and they were like, you can keep it on here, this JPEG on here forever. It's like, okay, well, actually you can't. You have to change your hard drives every couple of years. But it's just that NFTs, for some reason, people think they're eternal. And like to say what Sadie said, people think that oil and canvas is eternal. Talk to any conservator, they're not. It's just about this moment when a person who's acquiring it feels really safe buying it. So an NFT is actually, the thing about them is they're about eternity and they're about money. They're about the fact that your money is going to be more secure or profitability down the line. And I think that it's a tricky thing because it becomes contentious sometimes. People try to talk about them because you can kind of position somebody saying you're sort of being conservative, you're not interested in this thing that's actually very democratic. I think that moment where they made the, what was it called, the Declaration of Independence available as an NFT, that's democracy. I would 1,000% buy a portion of the Declaration of Independence just on but the fact that it's meaningful as art. If anybody could figure out how to make NFTs bring more money into artists, I'm for it. But outside of that, I just think they're kind of a trick.
I guess I have the microphone now. So I'm one of the few collectors here today. So I come at this in a slightly different way. I find it interesting that this morning we have a panel of really independent thinking galleries. And this afternoon we have a panel on the art market, which to me is like polar opposites. And so how do you keep your artists from following the market? Because I think that's the sort of the beginning of the end of what happens in artist careers. I've seen now so many artists whose careers skyrocket and then fall back to earth. And so how do you sort of help your artists understand that change in what they do is good versus keeping on doing the same thing over and over again in a different color?
Good question.
Well, I think artists really trust me when I talk to them. I think the way I live, the way I lead the gallery, and the way we do business is very transparent for them, and there's nothing really hiding there, and which means that we are capable of talking about, this is a good time to stop. This is a good time to move forward, something different. But I think it's really those conversations and being very close to your artists. And we didn't open the gallery to just profit off these ideas that are ultimately they will destroy somebody, right? Either the artist or the gallery. But yeah, I think that's how we do it, at least us.
Trust, transparency.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. You just have to give the best advice that you have to be honest, really honest. And sometimes an artist doesn't like to hear that, but you just have to give the best advice that you can give. Having said that, every artist, you can't generalize because everybody is different. There are some artists who are paying much more attention to the transactional side of things, to the auction prices or all of that, or what their friends are, the prices of the artists that they admire or hang out with. Some artists are very conscious of all of that, and there are other artists who are literally quite isolated from that side of things because they've chosen that for themselves. And you have to pitch your advice differently to those different types of sensibilities. But it's very difficult sometimes, especially when there's a feeling from an artist that they're somehow missing out. And we're now in a very, very different time from when I opened the gallery 28 years ago, where artists have a lot more options now. Most of the people that we work with don't just have 2 galleries anymore, which is how it was when I started. Artists have 5 galleries, 6 galleries. Some people have 10 galleries, so they've got all of these other options, and they're listening to a lot of other opinions. So sometimes that can be quite tricky.
Tricky.
It's also a very difficult industry where you can't lower the value of an artist's work without causing a total crash on the career. It's like in any other industry, if a product isn't selling well, you can lower the price and it doesn't necessarily, like what day you book a hotel room, it's a different value, but you know that the quality of the hotel room is the same on Tuesday as it is on Saturday. And I think, unfortunately, collectors have, excluding you, Jill, because you're amazing, collectors have a very complicated relationship to that number, and if that number goes down, they're gonna think something about the artist. And so we've really, unfortunately, created a system where the artist has to get 5% more creative every year. I mean, it's a tremendous amount of pressure. And I think that it's better for artists to kind of just take a break, but they've got bills to pay, they've got responsibilities. So it's a really difficult thing. And I think it works well when a gallery can kind of help support an artist through a quiet time or a time of retreat. Which I know dealers have, for sure.
Great question.
Thanks, everyone, for sharing your experiences. I have 2 related questions. What type of operational aspects have you taken and implemented from other industries outside of the art world in order to support your business? And 2, how do you measure the health of your internal organization, not only in terms of the internal culture, meaning your gallery team, your staff, but also in terms of tracking risks and benefits of various opportunities affecting decision-making?
Wow. That sounds like a professional business, and mine feels like a very instinctive business. I didn't do an MBA, I mean, it grew quite kind of organically. I'm going to answer the second part of your question, because that's where I feel most comfortable. The culture of my gallery is very important to me, and it's an ongoing project. But one of the things is everybody has got to be kind to each other. That's the really, and in general terms, that's one of the things that we all say to each other all the time is, like we're running as fast as we can. There's a lot of stress. People work really long hours. There's a lot of traveling, but let's all be kind to each other. So I try and do that. There is a profit share as well in my gallery, which is also different to how a lot of galleries run in New York. We don't do bonus commissions. I don't know if you guys did that. I'm sorry, what's it called? Sales commissions. Yeah. We do a profit share. It just seems better, because then you can reward people who are on the front desk and also making the sales, and
Which is a shift that's happened a lot in the restaurant industry, to speak about different industries. That's this shift where all of a sudden you started seeing, it's not always in New York, but in certain cities, you see a fee that's not just, and I worked in restaurants for over a decade and feel like, it's a little bit messed up that the bartender who works on Saturday night gets more than the hostess.
Right, than brunch.
Yeah. But I mean, it's very, I feel like nobody knows your strengths and weaknesses as well as your employees. I think they know them pretty well. It can be very vulnerable, I think, because you're just, for me at least, there's so much just throwing noodles at a wall to try and make things work. And I think figuring out how to make sure that you're building a culture at the gallery where people sort of know what to expect. It's very difficult. I think it's a hard question to answer openly, because it's very.
I also think that's one of the most difficult things running a gallery in 2024 is the HR side of things, because we're not like corporate businesses for the most part that have had training. So that's one of the things that has happened in my business over the last 5 years, is there has been some training, because generally speaking, they're very personal shops that we just started without too much kind of.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think if you have somebody who's worked with you for over 10 years, everybody has to change with the company as you're changing, and that can be hard too, to how to get you.
yeah, in that sense, I think the gallery, for example, has gone through different moments in which there was no organigram, there was no hierarchy, there was no, almost like, it was just like a family-run business and everybody was working. Then we went up to be a bit more organized, and also I think to empower people is very important also, because they do work so hard and in so many ways for the galleries. So we've made partners, a number of people, and I think that part has been very important for us and for the artists as well, because there's more people they can trust, there's more people to talk in the gallery, and then I think that part has been beneficial, and in the way we, also because it keeps it very dynamic, it keeps very different views, they're all very different people, much younger, some sell, some don't sell, so it really is, it makes the whole conversation about what having a gallery today is from a very different perspective, and they're all very connected to the artist, so I think that's...
It also takes a lot of money to professionalize a company, so like to have somebody do HR training, that's, you know, there was a lot of like me sitting at the Strand and reading business books like on a Sunday, like to be perfectly honest. I couldn't even afford to buy the books, I was just reading them in the store.
Can you tell us a little bit?
How to read a profit and loss sheet.
We can take one more question.
Hi, thank you very much. I wanted to alight on Jasmin's observation about us all thinking about death, and also Sadie's observation about the raison d'etre of art fairs being to meet new people, and thinking about, I wanted to ask really, if art fairs go away, for whatever reason, what are the ways that galleries can, or thinking outside of art fairs, what are the ways that you as galleries want to or can think about meeting new people, and to what extent are you concerned about there being new people to meet?
I think if artworks were to disappear, nothing would stop us anyway of what we want to get out of what we're doing. And basically, we'll probably just team up, collaborate with a gallery somewhere else and do exchanges or do pop-ups or, you know, like really, I don't think that is a system that it's there, it's very professional. But in terms of why we do it, I think if the fair is not there, those exchanges would still happen with the different regions that we are interested in, or the artists, or the galleries. And yeah, I think probably that's how I would do it.
I think art fairs they'll just change a little bit. I mean, talking about doing one-person booths, I mean, that's definitely, you know, it makes the art fair more exciting because people can discover a whole body of work by an artist, and that definitely seems to be, it's going in that direction. I think they need to adapt a little bit, actually, but they will do that naturally. So I don't see that I will stop doing them for the moment. Because you do actually meet new people. The question is, who are those new people? That's a really, really big question, because I mean, Jill Krause and Wendy, who's also here, you know, these are wonderful collectors. And we need to make more collectors like them. And how we do that is a big question, because at the fairs, you're often meeting people who are coming into the art world for the first time, and they behave very, very differently to these collectors. And it's about education, and that takes a long time. So that's a really big question, actually. Yeah. That's a huge question.
Next panel, or next year. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, speaking of my old friend death, unfortunately, over the next 20 years, we're going to see the largest distribution of wealth from one generation to the next. So the millennials are going to become one of the wealthiest generations that we've ever seen, which is hard to conceive of now. I would very much like to participate in that. But not happening, but where was I? The people that I actually go to art fairs usually to see my friends that I've known. I definitely meet people there, but I find that the quality of relationships, and by that I just mean people that I have kept an ongoing relationship with for the past 10 years, I've always met through my artists. So I always meet really incredible thinkers through people that are already incredible thinkers. So like, I can't imagine a situation where I'm not continuing to meet, like, you know, and I'm talking like scholars, curators. But yeah, I think to Sadie's point, I do think that the millennial generation, of which I am a part of, unfortunately, our relationship to art is a little bit more like, what do you give me, and not what do I give the community. Mm-hmm. We're much more interested in having very low responsibilities for whatever reason. This is just what I find. It's like, of course, about what money the work is going to make, not how much can I store it, or how. So this sort of like philanthropic is not even close to what I'm talking about. There's no sense of responsibility from the millennial generation of like, they don't realize actually how much we need them in order to keep this conversation going. And until they feel that culturally, I mean, I would hope that they could learn it, but I don't know if they can.
To support the institutions, to support the publications, the writers, you know, it's all the artists, it's all so essential.
Totally. I think people think that millennials are going to be like more interested in digital stuff. I just don't think that's true. They're going to be interested in painting, figurative painting, because they want to make money. It's just like, how do we kind of shift that? I don't know.
On that happy note. Thank you all so much. Let's give a big round of applause to Sadie, Monica, Jasmin. Thank you, Andrew, for moderating. Thank you so much for being here.